where do you remove the human and where do you ramp up the human experience? The most valuable asset for any brand that is focused on, like we said, storytelling or experience is the human in the store. Therefore, that the value of those roles, so your ability to sell, your ability to connect and to create clienteling solutions or all the different parts of specialty retail is going to be incredibly valuable.
Ron, I've watched a lot of your content and I'm really excited to have you on the show. There is one question that is constantly coming up in the retail industry, and a lot of people are thinking about it, and I'd love to get your perspective, which is AI going to replace the retail workforce?
Well, first, thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate that. And I love this topic because the idea here of where like humans and retail are so connected is my lifetime's work. And so the question is really, can we create a business that has been inherently human centric, meaning, retail is as old as time. It's what we kind of joke that it's the second oldest profession because it's in every city. It's in every part of the world. Retail is run by humans, and it's how we've built community. It's how we've discovered new careers. It's how we've kind of built brands and industries that are so rooted in human connection. And, today we sit at this intersection that I think is probably the most exciting time in the history of retail of how do we integrate efficiencies and things like robotics into retail. And so the long answer to your question is we will never replace humans in retail. We never will, because the idea here of trust and the impact that it has on brands, the impact it has on loyalty, customer acquisition, it's an endless stream of human connection and loyalty. And I think it's so exciting to watch the evolution. But at the same time, we are incredibly human-centric as an industry.
I agree. And I think, Akash, you have a slightly different perspective, a slightly different take on it, right? I've heard you say it a couple of times where how it's all going to balance out eventually, right? How there are going to be some agents involved and some humans. Tell us more about your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the retail experience is going to be significantly different, right? Firstly, because I think for decades, the experience have been you go to a store, you roam around, you pick something up, you go to a billing counter, you pay for stuff and get out, right? That's been the experience. I think, the experience is going to be significantly different. I think there is going to be a good balance of, technology and interaction with human and likes of that. And there's, of course, in front of the scenes and behind the scenes. Today, there's so much happens behind the scenes that is driven by the human as well as in front of the scene. I think behind the scenes is going to get, significantly automated, right? And more human energy is going to be all about the right experience that need to be given to the customers with the right tools, right? Today, when you go into the store and talk to a store associate who's joined 5 days back, they are not excited. In fact, they are scared because somebody is going to come and ask something that they don't know about. And a lot of those things are going to evolve very, very quickly through AI and technology.
Yeah, I agree with that very much. Yeah, if I could just add, I think part of the challenge, Akash, of the industry has always been like time and resources. And retail is an industry that inherently is challenged with time and resources because the ecosystem of e-commerce and planning and allocation and distribution puts pressure on stores. in order for stores to be profitable. And so where we can find ways to let humans be humans and let technology solve some of the biggest challenges behind the scenes is exactly where I think the most exciting part of this is today.
True, true. And Ron, I think, Gen Zs were the first generation that have completely grown online, right? They're the first they're digital first, and yet we see a huge percentage of Gen Zs preferring, going to stores. And there are, I think, statistics that you've published around 58% are choosing stores, whereas the same number for millennials is 48%, and maybe for boomers it is 38% or the likes of that. What tell us more about that research, and why do you think that change is coming in?
Yeah, I thank you for that concept, like bringing out that concept, because I think it actually surprises people. Because when you ask the general population, do you think people who grew up with an iPhone in their hand or a mobile device shop more online or they shop in stores? They are almost always going to say in stores or in online. But when you actually do the data, it's the highest percentage of in-store shopping of any generation in history. And I think it is because it's burnout of technology. It's burnout of just trying to discover things that are online. It's validating whether the product is real or not, if the imagery is real, how does it touch and feel? And so there's this very much a trend of, driving traffic through digital technology, but then say, let's have the most human experience possible in stores. And brands that are doing that are the ones that are winning right now with that group, and just saying, we're going to fully embrace what it means to have an in-person experience versus coming in and finding a touchscreen. And I love that trend.
Makes sense. And I think there are, what I'm seeing is, young consumers are really getting fatigued by fully digital experiences, right? Like they're honestly exhausted. They're always on the screens. Even we as non-Gen Zs or millennials, even personally, I feel very overwhelmed by technology a lot of times. And sometimes I just want to shut it off and just be human again, right? So I think that's where, for Gen Zs, it's much harder because their life is completely surrounded by this. Whereas for us, we've had a childhood which was more raw and non-digital first, if you may.
Well, I was just going to add the part of it, though, that I think is the challenge is they are shopping in store, but they're also doing things like posting in stores. The average dwell time is 40 minutes. And that's because they're also taking video, posting live from the store, the ability from a brand to also then, you're not just selling to one customer, you're selling to their entire following at the same time. They're going live in stores, they're taking photographs, they're posting. And so the experience is not just one-on-one. It's one to many, but it's still very, very human. But they may not convert. That's the challenge they may be in store, but they may not buy in store. And it's because they want to be able to create content, but they're not necessarily there to make a purchase. That's a real challenge in the industry.
Right. And I think a lot of shopping journeys, are starting at different places, right? Sometimes they're starting online and they're landing to stores, and sometimes they're, starting in the store and then they're, going online, and there are different permutations of that as we see. And Akash, I remember in the initial years of building G-Store, right? You personally spent a lot of time in retail stores. I remember there were days when you've slept in stores. So tell us more about what you saw 5 years back versus what you're seeing now in terms of the shopping experience change and the way shoppers are, interacting with technology as well as inventory in the stores.
I would say the key thing that has changed across last few years is the aspect of almost like a empowerment that today's shopper has of information to start with, right? I think today's shopper wants to know what is available, what is not available, wants to know a lot more details about what they are buying. Is it sustainable? Is it not sustainable? Want to understand, a lot better around, in what channels it is available. At the end of the day, the need or the demand, for the experience has changed quite a bit, right? And of course, I think the more you get exposure to the kind of experiences, like one brand comes up with the experience, right? Think about on equivalent on the online world, right? Once you start getting Prime as delivery, like next day delivery, like pretty much everybody expected next day delivery from everybody. Like, it didn't matter who are you buying from. So I think as any of the brands are getting more and more experiences, right? You're pretty much saying, oh, yeah, this seems normal now. Like if I'm able to see, the quantity of a SKU in a store real time, that becomes like the norm, right? Everybody go, oh, why am I not able to see? Do you have this SKU in the store real time or not? So I think the demand for experience has been kind of changing pretty rapidly for. From consumers side, and I think it is gonna start becoming critical for retail to kind of start giving that experience, because the experience is still very, very, I would say, patchy. In one store you might get one really good experience, and then when you're going to the next store you might just expect the same experience, but because of n different reasons you might not get it. So I think that uniformity is also going to be a critical piece in terms of what they're demanding.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And I think regardless of us realizing that there's going to be a balance between technology and human experience in the stores, there are retailers who are still assuming, that convenience will automatically replace the need for human interaction, right? There are retailers that are going far from this concept. Like, why do you think that is happening, Ron?
I think, there could be, number one, cost efficiencies. So you think about the trends that are happening in business around employment costs, or the union conversations. When managing humans is inherently complicated and messy, and so you would say, well, where can we lean heavier into technology that's more predictable? Kind of to Akash's point of it. Retail experiences are very unpredictable, and so you would say, well, how can we limit or improve the consistency between brands? So I do think that's one aspect where you could say the checkout is more consistent, or because of the way that you've built it, or staffing, like planning allocation, some of the operations that go behind could be more consistent. But I also think it's a fun trend. There have been some headlines around, a company that has built and opened and a retail business only using agents, that source of the real estate that was available in San Francisco, and the agent signed the lease, and the agent posted the jobs, and the agent did the interviews and bought the product. So, there are really fun headlines, but that's not reality for most brick and mortar businesses in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also feel, convenience and technology are a lot easier to measure. The human effort and the outcome is much more difficult, right? Like, of course, managing humans is difficult in one place, but even measuring the outcome of it becomes like a different paradigm altogether. And I think that is also changing the way retailers are thinking about some of their store experiences. Right?
Agreed.
I think there is also a notion of, in the industry that I'm seeing, which is wanting to do frictionless everything, right? My take on that is a little bit that like consumers are not really looking for frictionless everything. They're really looking for, can you automate some of the not so important or not so value adding tasks for me, right? Like, for example, finding a product, for example, standing in a queue for a checkout and stuff like that. Whereas you still want associates for that interaction, for that warmth connect, for styling. I mean, I just, I cannot do without an associate helping me in a store. And sometimes it's almost like, you're too demanding as a consumer. But what are you seeing around that, Ron? Like, what are people demanding in terms of the stores being frictionless versus not?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because you're right. What are the components of your brand? Every brand is different. So you would say, if I'm in luxury, the business, the most friction that I want is the human part of storytelling. I was the head of stores for Saint Laurent for North and South America. And my number one responsibility was to teach storytelling. It wasn't product knowledge. It was, Saint Laurent is one of the most storied and important luxury brands in history. And so you would say the friction that I want is that I want someone to tell me the stories of why the design elements, the prints, the fit, the fabrics, the leather. Like, I want someone to tell me everything about this brand. But when I'm ready to check out, if I'm ready to find inventory, I'm ready to have this shipped, it's a trunk show and there's logistics around it. I don't want any of that to be hard. And so you think, even in the world of luxury, there's so much behind the scenes that we can become even more efficient, because that's also, a customer, by the time they're ready to check out or to make that purchase, they're ready. And that's where you don't want friction. So I love the idea that no one can tell stories in retail like humans. You just can't. You could watch a video. You could have a movie screen running of the runway show, but you can't replace the storytelling of why you're there and the history behind the brands. But when you have like inadequate POS systems, if you don't know where your inventory is, you can't get the inventory or get it shipped efficiently. You can't go to another country. All of that just creates pain points for the customer.
True. And I think it's also, there are brands that are sort of trying, digital, interaction points at the store, right? For looking through the catalog, looking through, real time inventory in the store, right? And I think there is a lot of value to it, but the storytelling aspect of it is what is going to lack. But are there different ways of solving for that? I remember, Akash, you've mentioned in a couple of instances where how voice is going to be such a powerful tool in the retail stores, right? How there's so much intent and information that you can capture just by using voice as a technology in the store. How are you thinking from a technology innovation perspective around it, and what are the possibilities there?
Yeah, I think when you interact with store associate, why you like it is because you get a very contextual conversation that comes along with it, right? Of course, store associate understands where you are in the store. He or she even might understand what you've been kind of looking at it. He and she might understand what was the history of your purchase. So I think, there is a lot of contextual conversation that happens when you and store associate kind of interacts with each other, right? Now, of course, when you start kind of thinking this through from technology perspective, if you can really bring that same context to technology, right? And the technology has all other contexts that store associate cannot have. For example, much better understanding of fashion, much better understanding of trends and likes of that. And if you can mix together with the interaction that you have, I think it can be a very, very powerful experience, right? Now I think how this gets delivered I think it's going to be a combination of human plus AI in a certain way, right? Or is it human behind the scene and AI in front of the scene in a certain way? We all have to kind of wait and watch. But I think if you can have a contextual conversation with your shopper in the store right at that moment, understanding all the spatial aspects of that conversation, and yet have tons of learnings that you can have from different aspects of AI. I think that experience can be very, very, powerful. And I strongly feel as we kind of go forward in the industry, some of these things are going to evolve towards that direction.
Mm-hmm.
True. Yeah. Ron, you've spent a lot of time with retail, frontline workers, right? And why do you think their value might actually increase with the use of AI?
Yeah, and I think that when I mentioned earlier that I think this is one of the most exciting times, I actually think it's also one of the best times to join, as because what we've been talking about here is this idea of where do you remove the human and where do you ramp up the human experience? And there will be a line. It's very different by brand, but the idea here of the most valuable asset for any brand that is focused on, like we said, storytelling or experience is the human in the store. And so therefore that the value of those roles, so your ability to sell, your ability to connect and to create clienteling solutions or all the different parts of specialty retail, joining retail now, someone that loves to be around people and loves to connect is going to be incredibly valuable. Every part of what we're going to crave is going to be incredibly valuable. This I feel so strongly about. And I spend a lot of time with college students and I ask a lot of questions usually they're studying something in retail. A lot of it is supply chain, like buying, planning, sometimes design, all the operations, logistics. They're all getting degrees in these parts of this business. And my question is always like, well, did you ever consider a career in stores? And almost always it's no. Well, 95% of the time it would be no. And I'm like, well, let me tell you why choosing a career in stores and then moving into other parts of the business can be so valuable. And how you really understand the customer. You understand how the business operates. The biggest percent of the business is still coming from stores. And if you start there, you've built a foundation that can then carry you through the rest of your career. And you may love like finance and you ultimately want to work as a CFO. But if you know how the business works and you've spent time with customers, your love of this industry just exponentially grows. And the skills you learn, this is what I tell students, is the skills you'll learn spending all day, every day, speaking to strangers is a skill that you will be able to use for the rest of your life. And they may or may not believe me, and it's fine. But, I'm still going to stand there and say, learning how to sell is the ultimate hack of your career. It is. Mm-hmm. No matter what you do, you're always selling. No matter what you do, you're selling yourself. You're better as an interview, as someone in an interview. You're better as an interviewer. When you're hiring a team, you're a better leader. You're a better coach. So start in stores.
That is true. And I think it's when you said, it sort of resonates because you're constantly selling, even in a corporate culture. Even when me as a technology builder, it's so important to make sure that, you're constantly evaluating yourself against the benchmarks and learning from it, right? And I think the retail store experience, especially when you're constantly talking to consumers of different shapes and forms and behavioral natures, etc., you should so much learn about the softer aspects of interaction and human belongingness, and how do you meet someone where they are in their thought process. It's I think there's so much value that you can get from there.
Right. Agreed. Well, and the best part of leading others is finding their best skill. Okay, what are their ultimate dreams and goals? And the better you are at coaching and asking great questions and building confidence in others is how you lead a great team. And so this is very off topic for what we're discussing today, but I believe fully in this idea of, the first direct report that you have early in your career shapes how you think about leadership. And it shapes how you think about the future of work. And when I put that out to people and say, like, well, you remember your first boss? Do you remember your first job? People always do. And so, well, but what impact did that person have on the decisions you were making next? And in retail, it's even more interesting because you are around the same people. You're not at a desk. It's a high pressure environment. And so you see people, how they evolve through the world with the lens of not sitting at a desk and doing one job, but actually in a very human, emotional space. So your leadership skills actually develop more quickly than like the quarterly touch base that you have when you sit at a desk. So I know I continue to talk about this, but the human skills that you get in this business that doesn't require any education are life skills that take you forward for the rest of your life.
Yep. So
it's very powerful.
I absolutely agree. And I think what I'm hearing is it's not that we will need fewer humans in the store. We basically need better enabled humans with better systems helping in the background for them to be truly effective, right? The store associates need to sort of be enabled with the right technology so that they can come out of the operational chaos, concerned about inventory accuracy issues, findability issues, and stuff like that. It can actually serve customers better. So, Akash, from your perspective of, building technology and both in the warehouse world and in the retail world, how do you think the system building is going to evolve so that the retail experience, both from the store staff perspective as well as from the consumers in the stores or shoppers in the store perspective, can be catered better? What are some of the things that the newer systems are doing?
Yeah, I think, firstly, a lot of, and we talked a little bit about this, firstly, a lot of backend needs to be kind of automated. And, automation are of two nature. Like one is, automating the physical part of it. Second is automating the decision-making part of it. So a lot of backend needs to be kind of, automated. I also believe that there's opportunity now to kind of think about things more end-to-end. For example, what you put on your sale window impacts what kind of size curve you should have on the floor, impacts what you should ship from DC to the store, and likes of that. So there's so much end-to-end, improvements that you can do. And these are all, cyclic in nature, right? What you decide before even you decide to put something on the sale window, you have to make sure that you have the right inventory in the store or right size curve in the store and likes of that, right? Today we are seeing some of these things are even impacting e-commerce. What you put on the sale window impacts your e-commerce sale, right? So I think with technology, today it's fairly possible to start looking at things fairly end to end, right? And take more and more holistic decisions, and then empowering the operations with those, kind of decisions to really kind of make the right, right impact. Second thing I think is going to be pretty important is, I think for most of the times in retail, I think the only information you used to have that somebody came, bought this and went. That's it. Like, unlike e-commerce where you have tons of data, right? Even if you're scrolling something, you would have the data in e-commerce. The only data retail used to have is that somebody came, bought something and went out. That's it. And that is changing. That is changing pretty drastically. I think today, with different aspects of technology, whether it is, vision, whether it is RFID, whether it is, different aspects of, captures, you are getting much better understanding of what's happening in the store, right? But I haven't seen that converting into the right amount of experimentation that should be done to understand the consumer better, right? And the layouts of the store still changes once in like 3 months, 4 months, right? The layout on your website changes every few minutes, depending upon, how different people in a different region are behaving, right? So I think, once you start kind of getting that data, how do you leverage that data to kind of influence every single decision, from what you're buying to what you're allocating to how you're telling the story to the consumer, and how you're placing things, how you're getting feedback very, very quickly. How do you run loops of feedback and, understand the behavior of the consumer for that particular, product set very, very quickly. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be done once you start getting that, data aspect of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's one of the areas that AI is very much helping us, is that insight. Like, how do you take all of that data from all different channels and put it in one place and be able to then, create the correct buying and planning strategies, the right assortment based on geography and weather, the right levels of staffing, all of it. AI is very much helping us be smarter here about the right decisions and the right investments to make.
True. Ron, how valuable is it for store staff to get more curated tasks and more, instead of a store manager chasing them down to do something, versus technology presenting it to them in the right place with the right amount of priority, right, and agency? How are you looking that space evolve, and are store colleagues really ready for that kind of change, and are store managers ready for that kind of change as well?
Yeah, I think it's been relatively slow. I think this is also an industry, and you're both, on the technology side, that is relatively slow to adopt new technology. They like the ideas here of big decisions or big shifts. They're generally not like first movers into it. And so you would say, well, what's the first step that we can take to create an impact or create a positive impact on our business? And I think today some of it around your question around like priorities and work is exactly that. Like assessing the skills of the team and thinking about what operational tasks should they not do, what things, maybe it's like kind of some of the shipping decisions or POS decisions or merchandising decisions that were very kind of human centric in the past. How can we take that away? And then the effort goes exclusively into human connection. And so sometimes the priorities are about skill set, but now we're developing things like AI coaching that's listening to you on the sales floor and assessing that against your goals, and then providing coaching opportunities as an AI coach that the human really couldn't do consistently. And so I do think we're able now to assess skills and impact using technology that we've never had before. And so those are some areas like I can already see this shift in leadership and in coaching and in skill set development that we've never had before.
Ron, are you also seeing some sort of pushback from colleagues or discomfort from colleagues from them being assessed with AI or being recorded, the voice recording aspect as Akash talked about? Do you see some sort of discomfort there?
There is discomfort for sure. And so but I look at it and say, well, if we agree to invest here, and if you're willing to, let's just try this for a week and understand its impact, you're going to, I believe, really very much change someone's mind and like, wow, I didn't know that this could happen. A lot of it is around technology adoption happening today. You don't really know it until you try it. Yeah. And then you're like, wow, now I understand the impact that this can have. Well, now I want to learn more. Now I want to go deeper. And I think it's the same thing with voice and listening in stores. I think the fear is the unknown. It's not about replacement. It's about coaching you to be the best version of yourself. It's very different. We're all seeing videos of robots in, manufacturing plants and sorting packages. That's very different than building your skill set in a human connection.
Yep. And Ron, in terms of skills, given a lot of work that store colleagues did, is going to, more and more become automated because it's not as much value adding, right? What are some of those skills that are more important for frontline workers? What's the constant advice that you're giving them?
Yeah, the constant advice is the faster you build connections in stores, and traditionally the store has a higher conversion rate than e-commerce, significantly higher. So then the faster you're building connections, you're building a customer acquisition channel, you're building a retention channel, you're building loyalty, you have a higher average dollar transaction, you have a lower return rate. If you're doing all of that well, the store is your greatest asset in the business. But the minute that those statistics don't line up, the business can be very financially draining. And so those skills of like, let's teach you the ability to build a multi-million-dollar business in these four walls as, I call it very much like the ultimate entrepreneur, because nothing happens in a retail business if you don't open the door every day and let people in. It's very different than e-commerce that's 24/7. And so all of those skills, I think, are, again, going to translate into future careers, into other businesses. I interviewed someone this week, with a chain in the US that has opened 300 new locations in the last 5 years and is going to double then their current store count in the next 5. And because they discovered the store is the place where all of the business, all of the new customer acquisition, the impact on the communities is happening. So that those kind of entrepreneurial spirit, if you will, ideals are really important today.
Yeah, that's actually also true in the technology world, right, Akash? You're also seeing something similar happening when you're looking for talent, because I don't think we're now looking for single-streamed, excellence in one skill set. We're also looking to some extent for our all-roundedness, right? So, Akash, from a technology company perspective, how are you seeing that change?
Yeah, of course. I think given the rate at which technology product engineering is moving is changing, and and I think this has been proven, quite a number of times that, a small, well-knit team, of course, produces much faster, stronger than a large group of people. and with the current changes in core technology, with AI, with a lot of things that you can do around coding, around kind of UX generation and likes of that, you can actually do that for much larger modules today, right? Which means that a 7-person team can build a module that 25-person team was able to build, right? And one is of course the efficiency, general efficiency, but a 7-person team can understand each other and kind of coordinate and brainstorm a lot more effectively, and there is less loss in translation, right? In a 25 people team, you're still kind of translating 2 layers before somebody kind of actually codes, right? And now with a 7-person team, there's no loss in translation. The team really understands, kind of the problem statement equally, right? So I think that's what basically, what's happening. The idea to, I would say 80% product is becoming faster. I don't think there is any, shortcut to going from 80% to whatever 98% that you need to have to release a product. The idea to 80% is getting much, faster. I think 80 to 98% is always going to be hard, because that's where you really need to understand the nuance. You need to understand the nuance of the user, the behavior and likes of, that. But yes, I think smaller teams, 0 to 80% of the product, is becoming much, faster. And I think from skill set perspective, that's where industry or technology is going to demand more and more, right? How do you have the right skill set to go from 0 to 80% in 10x speed, so then you can test 5 ideas, and then finally go to that 80 to 98% journey in one of them, rather than one that you used to, do today.
Yeah. I think it reminded me of one of the interviews that I was listening from Chanel CEO, if I remember the name correctly, Lena. She basically calls out that how she basically remembers every person's name in her team in the company, and she puts in a lot of effort to make sure that she remembers people by their name and addresses them by their name, and that builds a different culture. And it's so much harder to do it in much bigger size teams than the smaller teams. You feel a lot more belongingness. You feel a lot more the cohesiveness is much higher. Ron, with that, are there any retailers that are really consuming AI well and are really striking the right balance between automation and human experience?
Yeah. I think every brand's on their own journey. I will say I have interviewed a few different people at Walmart on this topic, and Walmart being the largest retailer, the largest employer in the U.S., they have resources that almost no other company has, and so that the ability to think about change and the future of change, and think about, they were early in the agent conversation. They were early in like frontline training on AI. It wasn't like we're doing it just behind the scenes. They've actually offered AI training to every frontline associate in the entire company. And so I think that there are companies that are saying, you know what, we're not going to be afraid of this. We're going to embrace it and run and teach and provide tools and resources. So Walmart's been one. Of course, any brand rooted in technology like Apple is always going to be leading here. And same, like the customers are coming in because they're curious. We have to make sure the front line is fully invested here and understands the trends. I think adoption, I've seen all different versions of different tools being used, but the bigger the brand, the more important they know, and the efficiencies become even more relevant the bigger the scale. And so it will be, I think the next 6 months will be very interesting to see how adoption scales across different kinds of businesses, different square footage and product assortment and all of it. I think it's a fascinating time to watch how this will change.
Yeah. I remember you mentioning in one of the conversations that physical retail is more of a responsibility than an opportunity. What's your closing thought on that?
Oh, I love that. I said that. That's a good line. I think that's it is a responsibility. Because it's a responsibility to the fact that retail is still the largest private sector employer. In the US, it's 55 million people. And so the responsibility is not just because of running a business. It's a responsibility to, the economic success of the country, to local communities, to future careers, to all the different brands that people are creating. Retail is the glue that holds all of this together. And that investment, and whether you're a Walmart coming into a new city or you're a small family-owned business, retail has a massive responsibility to play in the success of the communities, for jobs, for financial success, for, availability of product. Sometimes in that particular Walmart is the only place to buy food. And so in parts of the country where, grocery stores are 25 miles away and gas prices are at an all-time high, we need you. And so the responsibility for me is much deeper than just a place to sell things. It's a human experience that we all need.
Makes sense. So Ron, tell us about your mission. What are you up to in the retail industry?
My primary goal is to celebrate the front line here. As I've said, the power of that particular group of people that have not always been recognized and celebrated and thought of as having real careers is, after spending my entire career in stores, I know how important those jobs are. And I want to make sure that people know how important they are, and that this is an incredible career choice. It's an absolute way that you create impact. It's how you can sustain personal wealth. There are so many reasons. So almost 6 years ago now, writing my first book called Retail Pride was exactly this, the guide to celebrating your accidental career. This is often not a chosen path. So even if it's accidental, be proud of the work, be proud of that impact that you have. And those two words, retail and pride, had never been used together. And I'm proud of starting that conversation, changing the language, and the impact that book has had on the industry is something I'm personally proud of and will continue to do.
Ron, is there anything new that you're working on that you'd like to share with the audience?
So I do, I host my own show called Retail in America. Season 1 was traveling around the US, traveled to over 30 states, well over a year, lived in an RV and met retailers, founders, small businesses, large businesses, and interviewed all kinds of people. That was season 1. Season 2 was about a lot of it around technology solutions that are changing the industry. And season 3, which we're about to kick off, is about the human edge of selling. Because as you've heard me say, the ability to develop selling skills, not service. I very much differentiate that from service and selling, are skills that will be very necessary in the next decade ahead. And so Retail in America we're very much talking about selling. And that's across any kind of brand, any kind of skill and what that means. So Retail America. And then, I think I will be going on tour again, with the show. It's in 2027. So stay tuned for that.
That's awesome. Excited and looking forward to that, Ron. And where could we send people who are interested in talking?
No, thank you. So I'm very active on LinkedIn, so always connect with me there. And then at ronthurston.com, you can find videos and links, and I speak at conferences. I do some consulting for technology companies and advisory work for retailers. So I have my hands in a lot of things, but you can always find me at ronthurston.com.
Awesome. I think it was an excellent chat, Ron. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.